The blood-red sun sank below the jagged horizon, painting the Wyoming sky in shades of fire as Willow Wells clutched her doctor's bag, her heart pounding with every step toward the lonely cabin at the edge of Ogden. The letter had come 2 days ago, urgent, desperate, written in a shaky hand begging for a doctor who wouldn't ask questions. Being the only female physician within 100 miles in 1879 meant she'd grown accustomed to unusual requests, but something about this one had pulled at her like a physical force. She'd been in Ogden for only 3 months, establishing her practice against the whispers, the doubts, the outright hostility. At 32, she'd already weathered more storms than most: the loss of her parents, the grueling years at the Women's Medical College in Philadelphia, and the constant battle to be taken seriously in a profession dominated by men. But Wyoming territory was different. Women could vote here. Maybe, just maybe, they'd accept a woman doctor too. The cabin door swung open before she could knock, revealing a tall man with shoulders broad as an oak beam and eyes the color of steel. A thin layer of stubble covered his jaw, and his dark hair was slightly too long, curling at the edges of his collar. His expression was a storm of worry and suspicion. "You the doctor?" His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it much lately. "Doctor." "Willow Wells," she confirmed, meeting his gaze steadily. "And you must be Mr. Harrington, Garrett Harrington." He nodded, stepping aside to let her enter. "Thank you for coming." The cabin was clean but sparse: a table and chairs, a stone fireplace, shelves stocked with basic supplies. A curtain separated the main room from what she presumed was a sleeping area. The scent of coffee mingled with wood smoke. "My daughter," he said, nodding toward the curtain. "Fever started 3 days ago, getting worse." Willow moved toward the curtained area. "How old is she?" 7, he replied, following close behind. "Her name's Sophie." Behind the curtain, a small figure lay beneath a quilt on a narrow bed. The girl's face was flushed with fever, her blonde hair damp with sweat. Willow set her bag down and placed a gentle hand on the child's forehead. "Sophie," she said softly, "my name is Dr. Wells. I'm going to help you feel better." The girl's eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes the same steely gray as her father's. "My throat hurts," she whispered. "I know, darling," Willow said, taking out her stethoscope. "Let me have a look at you." As she examined the child, Willow was aware of Garrett Harrington's intense gaze. The worry of a father was something she'd encountered often in her practice, but there was something else in his expression: a loneliness, a depth of feeling that suggested Sophie was his entire world. "It's strep throat," Willow said finally, turning to Garrett. "Serious but treatable. I've brought medicine that will help bring down the fever. She needs plenty of fluids, rest, and regular doses of this." She removed a bottle from her bag, 3 times daily, and cool compresses for the fever. The relief in his eyes was immediate and powerful. "She'll be all right, with proper care, yes," Willow smiled reassuringly. "I'll stay tonight to monitor her if that's acceptable." Something flickered across his face: surprise, maybe gratitude. "You do that, of course." "It's what any doctor would do." He seemed to want to say more but simply nodded and moved to put a kettle on the stove. "I'll make some coffee." Through the night, Willow tended to Sophie, applying cool compresses and administering medicine. Garrett stayed awake as well, sitting in a chair by the bed, occasionally bringing fresh water or stoking the fire. They spoke little, but shared a silent vigil that felt oddly intimate. By dawn, Sophie's fever had broken. The girl slept peacefully, her breathing easier. Willow stepped outside onto the small porch, stretching her tired muscles. The sunrise was magnificent, turning the distant mountains gold. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Garrett's voice came from behind her. He handed her a steaming cup of coffee. "Breathtaking," she agreed, accepting the cup gratefully. "How long have you lived here?" "Almost 2 years. After my wife died, we needed a fresh start." Willow nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Sophie's a lovely child, strong too, like her mother." He leaned against the porch railing, his gaze distant. "Catherine was a force of nature. When the influenza took her, I thought." He paused, clearing his throat. "Sophie's all I have." "You've done well by her," Willow said softly. His eyes met hers, and something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of shared solitude. Not always. Being both mother and father isn't easy. Few worthwhile things are, she replied. For a moment they stood in companionable silence, watching the sun climb higher in the sky. Then Sophie called from inside, and the moment dissolved. Willow checked on her patient one final time, pleased with the improvement. The fever's gone, but she should rest for a few more days. I'll leave enough medicine for a week. If she worsens, send for me immediately. Your fee? Garrett asked, reaching for a tin on the shelf. Willow hesitated. She could see the cabin's simplicity, the worn clothes, the signs of a man working hard to provide. $3 will cover it. He counted out the money carefully. Thank you, Dr. Wells. Not many would ride out this far. It's my duty, she said, but they both knew it was more than that. Few doctors would have stayed the night. I'll come back in 3 days to check on her. True to her word, Willow returned 3 days later. Sophie was sitting up in bed, color returned to her cheeks, a picture book in her lap. Her face brightened when she saw Willow. Dr. Wells. Papa said you'd come back. Of course I did, Willow smiled, setting her bag down. How are you feeling? Much better. My throat doesn't hurt anymore. Willow examined her thoroughly, pleased with her recovery. You're healing beautifully, Sophie. You'll be running around in no time. Garrett appeared in the doorway, looking more rested than when she'd last seen him. He'd shaved, and his dark hair was combed neatly back. Good news. The best, Willow confirmed. She's on the mend. She can get up tomorrow, but nothing strenuous for another week. Relief washed over his face. Thank God. After checking Sophie's throat one last time, Willow packed her instruments. Is there anything else you need? The girl looked up shyly. Would you tell me a story before you go? Papa tells good ones, but I like hearing new stories. Garrett started to intervene. Sophie, Dr. Wells is busy. I'd be happy to, Willow interrupted, surprising herself. She pulled a chair beside the bed and thought for a moment. Have I ever told you about the brave princess who saved her kingdom with nothing but her wits and a magic hairbrush? Sophie's eyes widened. No. Tell me. Willow launched into a tale she invented on the spot about a princess whose magical hairbrush could weave dreams into reality. As she spoke, she noticed Garrett leaning against the doorframe, listening just as intently as his daughter, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. When the story concluded, Sophie clapped her hands delightedly. That was wonderful. I wish I had a magic hairbrush. Well, your hair is certainly magical enough, Willow said, gently touching one of Sophie's blonde curls. It's like spun gold. Mama used to braid it, Sophie said, her voice suddenly small. She knew all the fancy ways. Papa tries, but he says his fingers are too big. An uncomfortable silence fell. Garrett straightened, his expression shuddered. Time for your medicine, Sophie. As Willow prepared to leave, Garrett walked her to her horse. The afternoon sun was warm on their faces, the breeze carrying the scent of pine and sage. Thank you for the story, he said. She doesn't smile like that often. She's a delightful child. Willow adjusted her saddle. Mr. Harrington, Garrett, please. Garrett, she amended. If you'd like, I could. That is, I'm rather good at hair. I could teach Sophie some simple braids, when she's fully recovered, of course. He stared at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. That's kind of you, but we couldn't impose. It's no imposition. I was once a little girl who lost her mother, too. The words slipped out before she could stop them, his gaze softened. Then perhaps we'll take you up on that offer, Dr. Wells. Willow, she said, mounting her horse. My friends call me Willow. Willow, he repeated, and the way he said it made something flutter in her chest. Until next time. She rode away with the strange sensation that something significant had just happened, though she couldn't have said exactly what. Over the next few weeks, Willow found reasons to visit the Harrington cabin. She brought books for Sophie, herbs from her garden, once even a small cake from the town bakery. Each visit lasted longer than the last. She taught Sophie simple braids as promised, laughing at the girl's intense concentration. Garrett would watch them from a distance, something wistful in his gaze. One golden afternoon in early October, Willow arrived to find the cabin empty. A note on the door directed her to the small creek behind the property. Following a narrow path through tall grasses, she heard laughter before she saw them. Garrett and Sophie, fishing poles in hand, sitting side by side on the creek bank. Sophie spotted her first. "Willow, look. I caught 2 fish already." In the weeks since her illness, the girl had started calling her by her first name, a familiarity Willow found she didn't mind at all. "Impressive," Willow called, making her way down to them. "You'll be feeding the whole territory soon." Garrett stood, brushing dust from his trousers. Today he wore no coat, just a simple blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms browned by the sun. "We didn't expect you until tomorrow." "I was passing by," she explained, though it wasn't entirely true. She'd rearranged her schedule specifically to see them. "Thought I'd check in." "Well, you're just in time for dinner," he said, gesturing to the fish. "If you'd care to join us." The simple invitation shouldn't have made her heart quicken, but it did. "I'd like that very much." They spent a pleasant hour by the creek, Sophie chattering about everything from the birds she'd seen to the stories she'd been reading. Willow was struck by how different the girl was now, vibrant, talkative, her eyes bright with life. As the sun began to dip, they gathered their things and headed back to the cabin. Sophie ran ahead, leaving Willow and Garrett to walk side by side in companionable silence. "She's flourishing," Willow observed. "You've done well with her." Garrett looked ahead at his daughter, pride evident in his face. "She's stronger than I am, I think. After Catherine died, there were days I could barely get out of bed, but Sophie, she kept going, kept finding joy in small things. She taught me how to live again." "Children are resilient," Willow said softly, "but they still need guidance, love, which I try to provide, though God knows I'm fumbling through it." He glanced at her. "Your visits have been good for her, for us both." The simple statement carried weight, making Willow acutely aware of the growing attachment she felt toward both Sophie and her father. It was unprofessional, perhaps even unwise. And yet she couldn't bring herself to create distance. At the cabin, Sophie insisted on helping prepare dinner. Willow showed her how to clean the fish while Garrett gathered vegetables from his small garden. The domestic scene felt strangely natural, as if they'd been doing this together for years rather than hours. Over dinner, Garrett asked about her practice, her life before Wyoming. Willow found herself sharing stories she rarely told about her struggle through medical school, the professors who tried to dissuade her, the patients who refused to be treated by a woman doctor. "What made you come to Wyoming territory?" he asked, refilling her cup with coffee. "The opportunity," she replied. "Women have more rights here than anywhere else, and Ogden needed a doctor." "Lucky for us," Sophie piped up, making both adults smile. As darkness fell, Willow knew she should leave, but Sophie begged her to stay longer. "Please, just until bedtime." "I want to show you my drawings," Garrett intervened. "Sophie, Dr. Wells, Willow has other responsibilities. We can't keep her all night," but Willow found herself reluctant to leave. "I can stay a while longer. I'd love to see your drawings, Sophie." The girl's face lit up as she ran to fetch her sketchbook. Garrett gave Willow an apologetic smile. "She's become quite attached to you." "The feeling is mutual," Willow admitted, and their eyes held for a moment too long before Sophie returned, proudly displaying her artwork. Later, after Sophie had been tucked in, Garrett walked Willow to her horse. The night was clear, stars sprinkled across the vast Wyoming sky like diamonds on black velvet. "Thank you for dinner," Willow said, adjusting her cloak against the evening chill. "And for the company." "It's we who should thank you." He stood close enough that she could smell the pine scent of his soap. "Sophie hasn't been this happy well, since before Catherine died. She's a special girl. You're fortunate to have each other." He nodded, looking up at the stars. "There are nights I feel Catherine watching over us, approving, I hope." He turned his gaze back to her. "She would have liked you, Willow." The words touched her unexpectedly. "I'm sure I would have liked her too. Will you come again, Sunday perhaps?" "I'm attempting to roast a chicken, though I can't promise it will be edible." Willow laughed softly. "I'd be delighted, edible or not." As she mounted her horse, he reached up to adjust her stirrup, his hand briefly touching her boot. A small gesture, innocent enough, yet it sent warmth through her despite the cool air. "Ride safely," he said, stepping back. "The moon's bright tonight, but still." "I'll be fine," she assured him. Good night, Garrett. Good night, Willow. She rode away feeling lighter than she had in years, though she tried to temper the sensation with common sense. She was a doctor, they were her patients, or at least Sophie had been. Anything more would be complicated, perhaps even impossible. And yet. The Sunday dinner became a weekly tradition. Soon, Willow was spending most of her free time at the Harrington cabin. She brought medical journals to read while Sophie and Garrett fished. She helped tend the garden, taught Sophie more elaborate braids, and found herself laughing more than she had in years. One crisp November morning, Willow arrived to find Garrett chopping wood, his breath visible in the cool air. He smiled when he saw her setting down the axe. "You're early," he observed, wiping his brow with his sleeve. "No appointments this morning," she explained, dismounting. "Thought I might help with whatever you're doing today, preparing for winter," he said, gesturing to the woodpile. "It comes fast here." "So I've been told." "This will be my first Wyoming winter." She glanced toward the cabin. "Is Sophie inside?" A shadow crossed his face. "She woke with a headache, nothing serious, I think, but I told her to rest." Willow immediately moved toward the cabin. "Let me check on her." Inside, she found Sophie curled under a quilt, her face pale but not feverish. The girl brightened at the sight of her. "Willow, I told Papa I wasn't really sick, just tired." Willow examined her thoroughly, relieved to find no signs of serious illness. "Your father was right to let you rest. Sometimes our bodies just need a quiet day." She stayed by Sophie's bedside, reading to her from one of the books she'd brought. The girl drifted off to sleep, one small hand clutching Willow's. Carefully extracting herself, Willow found Garrett in the main room, concern evident in his posture. "She's fine," Willow assured him quietly. "Just tired," as she said. "Children sometimes need extra rest when they're growing." The relief in his eyes was palpable. "I worry more than I should." "It's what good fathers do," she said, touching his arm briefly. "She's fortunate to have you." He covered her hand with his own, a gesture that felt both natural and startling. "And we're fortunate to have you, Willow." The air between them seemed to change, charged with something unspoken. Willow was acutely aware of his closeness, the warmth of his hand over hers, the intensity in his gray eyes. The moment was broken by a soft sound from Sophie's room. Garrett stepped back, clearing his throat. "I should check on her." Willow nodded, trying to steady her breathing. "And I should help with the wood." Outside, she gathered split logs, arranging them in a neat stack by the cabin. The physical labor helped clear her head, though she couldn't entirely banish the feeling of Garrett's hand on hers, the look in his eyes. Later, when Sophie awoke feeling better, the three of them worked together preparing a simple stew. The domestic scene felt right somehow, as if they were a family rather than a doctor and her former patients. The thought both warmed and troubled Willow. She was building something here, something precious and fragile, without having consciously decided to do so. As December approached, bringing the first snow, Willow found herself thinking of the Harringtons constantly. Her practice kept her busy. Winter always brought illness and injury, but her thoughts strayed regularly to the cabin by the creek, to Sophie's laughter and Garrett's quiet strength. One afternoon, as she was finishing with her last patient, there was an urgent knock at her office door. Opening it, she found Sophie, cheeks red from cold, snow dusting her woolen hat. "Sophie, what are you doing in town alone?" Alarm coursed through her. "I'm not alone," the girl explained breathlessly. "Papa's at the general store. He said I could come invite you for Christmas dinner while he finishes shopping." Her eyes sparkled. "Please say you'll come. Papa's going to get a real tree and everything." Willow's heart melted at the child's excitement. "I'd be honored, Sophie. Thank you for the invitation. Wonderful." Sophie clapped her mittened hands. "It's going to be the best Christmas ever." As if summoned by his daughter's voice, Garrett appeared in the doorway, packages tucked under his arm. "Sophie, I told you to wait until I was done." He looked apologetically at Willow. "I hope she's not bothering you." "Not at all," Willow assured him, ushering them both inside out of the cold. "In fact, she's just invited me to Christmas dinner." "Ah," a slight color touched his cheeks. "I was going to ask you myself, but someone got too excited." He ruffled Sophie's hair affectionately. "I've accepted the invitation," Willow said, smiling at them both. I look forward to it. They stayed for tea, Sophie chattering about her plans for decorating the tree while Garrett watched her with fond amusement. When they prepared to leave, he hesitated at the door. Would you? That is, would you like to join us for the tree cutting tomorrow? There's a nice stand of pines about a mile from our place. Sophie thought you might enjoy it. The invitation was casual, but something in his expression suggested it meant more. I'd love to, Willow said, her heart lighter than it had been in days. The next day dawned clear and cold, the snow sparkling in the winter sunlight. Willow rode to the Harrington cabin, wrapped in her warmest cloak, anticipation building with each mile. She found Sophie waiting on the porch, practically bouncing with excitement. You came, the girl exclaimed, running to greet her. Papa said you might be too busy with doctor things. Never too busy for tree cutting, Willow said, dismounting. Where is your father? Getting the sled ready, Sophie explained, taking Willow's hand. Come see, around the back of the cabin, Garrett was attaching a small wooden sled to his horse. He looked up as they approached, his face breaking into a warm smile that made Willow's chest tighten. Right on time, he said. We're almost ready. The three of them set off, Sophie riding on the sled while Willow and Garrett walked alongside, leading their horses. The snow crunched beneath their boots and their breath formed clouds in the crisp air. Sophie sang Christmas carols, her clear voice carrying across the snowy landscape. Willow glanced at Garrett, finding him already looking at her. This is lovely, she said softly. Thank you for including me. It wouldn't feel right without you, he replied, his voice equally low. You've become important to us. Before she could respond, Sophie called out, pointing to a stand of pines ahead. Look, those are perfect. The tree selection process was serious business, with Sophie examining every candidate critically before finally selecting a modestly sized pine with full, symmetrical branches. Garrett chopped it down efficiently, and they loaded it onto the sled for the journey home. Back at the cabin, they set up the tree in a corner of the main room. Sophie directed the placement with the authority of a general, while Garrett and Willow exchanged amused glances over her head. Perfect, Sophie declared finally. Now for the decorations. From a wooden chest, Garrett produced a collection of ornaments, some store-bought, others clearly handmade. Catherine started collecting these when we were first married, he explained to Willow. Each year we added something new. Sophie held up a small wooden star. This one's my favorite. Mama painted it herself. Willow watched as father and daughter carefully hung each ornament, noting the tender care with which they handled the treasured objects. She stood slightly apart, not wanting to intrude on what was clearly a meaningful family ritual, but Sophie had other ideas. Willow, you have to help too. Here. She handed Willow a delicate glass bird. This one goes near the top. Accepting the ornament, Willow stepped forward to join them. Together, the three of them decorated the tree, Sophie sharing the story behind each special piece. When the last ornament was placed, Garrett lit candles carefully positioned among the branches, and they stood back to admire their work. It's beautiful, Willow breathed, the candlelight reflecting in her eyes. It needs one more thing, Sophie declared mysteriously, disappearing into her room. She returned moments later, holding something behind her back. Close your eyes, Willow. Curious, Willow obeyed. She felt Sophie press something into her hand. You can look now. Willow opened her eyes to find a small, crudely carved wooden heart in her palm. Painted in wobbly red letters were the words for Willow. I made it, Sophie said proudly. Papa helped with the carving, but I did the painting all by myself. It's for you to put on our tree, so you're part of our Christmas too. Emotion caught in Willow's throat, making speech impossible for a moment. She looked up to find Garrett watching her, something tender and uncertain in his expression. Sophie, he said gently, Dr. Wells might prefer to put this on her own tree at home. But the girl began to protest. It's perfect, Willow managed, her voice thick. And I'd be honored to add it to your tree if that's truly what you wish, Sophie beamed. Of course it is. Hang it somewhere special. With careful deliberation, Willow selected a spot near the center of the tree where the candlelight would catch the bright red paint. As she stepped back, her hand brushed against Garrett's. Neither of them moved away. Later, over hot cocoa and fresh baked cookies, Sophie regaled Willow with tales of Christmases past, while Garrett occasionally interjected with gentle corrections to her more fanciful recollections. The cabin was warm and fragrant with pine, the atmosphere one of simple happiness that made Willow's heart ache with unexpected longing. When it came time to leave, Sophie hugged her fiercely. "You'll come back for Christmas dinner, won't you? You promised." "I'll be here," Willow assured her, returning the hug. "Save me a seat." Garrett walked her to her horse as twilight deepened into night. Stars were beginning to appear in the clear sky, and the snow glowed blue in the gathering darkness. "Thank you for today," he said, helping her mount. It meant a great deal to Sophie. "And to me," Willow replied honestly. "I haven't celebrated Christmas properly in years, not since my parents died." He held her gaze for a long moment. "Then we'll make this one special for all of us." As she rode home through the quiet winter night, Willow acknowledged to herself what she'd been trying to deny for weeks. She was falling in love with Garrett Harrington. And quite possibly with his daughter as well. The realization should have frightened her. She'd built her life around her independence, her profession. Romance had never been part of her plan, especially not with a widowed rancher raising a young daughter. And yet, the thought filled her with joy rather than trepidation. Christmas Day arrived with fresh snowfall and brilliant sunshine. Willow closed her practice for the day, leaving a note on the door directing emergencies to the town hotel where she could be reached if needed. She dressed with special care, a forest green dress she rarely wore, her hair arranged simply but elegantly. The ride to the Harrington cabin seemed both too long and too short. Her heart raced with anticipation, yet she was also nervous in a way she hadn't been since her first day of medical school. The cabin looked transformed when she arrived. Evergreen boughs adorned the porch and cheerful smoke rose from the chimney. Before she could dismount, the door flew open and Sophie burst out, wearing a red dress and a huge smile. "You came. Merry Christmas, Willow." "Merry Christmas, Sophie," Willow laughed, climbing down from her horse. "You look beautiful." "So do you. Papa said you would." The girl grabbed her hand, tugging her toward the door. "Come see everything." Inside, the cabin glowed with warmth and light. More evergreen boughs decorated the mantel, alongside red berries and pine cones. The trees sparkled with candlelight and delicious aromas filled the air. Garrett emerged from the kitchen area, wiping his hands on a cloth. He stopped when he saw her, his expression softening into something that made Willow's breath catch. "Merry Christmas, Willow," he said, his voice warm. "Welcome, Merry Christmas." She handed him a small package, just a little something for both of you. Dinner was magnificent roast goose with all the trimmings, potatoes, winter vegetables, and fresh bread. Sophie chattered happily throughout the meal, while Willow and Garrett exchanged glances that grew increasingly meaningful as the evening progressed. After dinner, they exchanged gifts by the fire. Sophie unwrapped Willow's present, first a beautiful illustrated book of fairy tales that made the girl squeal with delight. "It's perfect, thank you, Willow." She hugged the book to her chest. "Now you open ours." Garrett handed Willow a small, carefully wrapped package. Inside was an exquisite silver hairpin adorned with a tiny pearl. "It was my grandmother's," he explained, his voice low. "I thought it suited you." "It's beautiful," Willow whispered, touched beyond words at the personal nature of the gift. "Thank you, Garrett, I'll treasure it." Sophie, watching them with bright eyes, suddenly jumped up. "I have another present, wait here." She disappeared into her room, returning with something hidden behind her back. "Close your eyes, both of you," they obliged, exchanging amused smiles. Willow heard rustling above them, then Sophie's triumphant voice. "Okay, open." Looking up, Willow saw a small bunch of greenery suspended from the ceiling beam, mistletoe, tied with a red ribbon. Her cheeks flushed as she met Garrett's startled gaze. "Sophie," he began, clearly embarrassed. It's tradition," the girl insisted, hands on her hips. "Mrs. Peterson at school said people in love kiss under the mistletoe at Christmas. And you two are in love, aren't you?" The blunt question hung in the air between them. Willow felt her heart pounding, unable to look away from Garrett's face, reading there the same turbulent emotions that coursed through her own veins. "Sophie," he said again, more gently, "it's not that simple." But the girl's face began to crumple with disappointment, and something in Willow broke free. Moving with a courage she didn't know she possessed, she stepped closer to Garrett. "Perhaps," she said softly, "it is that simple after all." For a heartbeat he remained still, uncertainty in his eyes. Then slowly he reached out to touch her face, his fingers trailing along her cheek with infinite tenderness. Time seemed to stop as he leaned forward, pressing his lips to hers in a kiss that was gentle yet held the promise of deeper passion. When they separated, Sophie was clapping delightedly. "I knew it. I knew you loved each other." Garrett laughed, the sound joyous and a bit shaky. "You're too clever for your own good, young lady." But his eyes never left Willow's face, and the look in them told her everything she needed to know. This wasn't just Christmas magic or momentary weakness. This was real and true, and possibly the beginning of something wonderful. The rest of the evening passed in a golden haze of happiness. They sang carols, played games, and told stories. Sophie eventually fell asleep by the fire, exhausted from excitement. Garrett carried her to bed, tucking her in with tender care. When he returned, he found Willow standing by the window, watching the snow fall in the moonlight. He came to stand beside her, their shoulders touching. "I should apologize for Sophie's matchmaking," he said, though he didn't sound particularly sorry. "No need," Willow replied, smiling up at him. "She simply saw what we were both trying to ignore." "And what's that?" he asked, turning to face her. "That sometimes life gives us second chances at happiness, if we're brave enough to take them." He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I never expected to feel this way again. After Catherine died, I thought that part of my life was over. Then you came along, with your medical bag and your fierce intelligence and your kindness, and everything changed." "For me as well," she admitted. "I've always defined myself by my work, never allowing room for anything or anyone else, until you and Sophie." He raised her hand to his lips, kissing her fingers. "What happens now, Willow?" "I don't know," she answered honestly. "My practice is in town, your ranch is here. We'll figure it out," he said with quiet confidence. "Together." They sealed this promise with another kiss, deeper than the first, a kiss that spoke of longing finally acknowledged and a future full of possibility. Winter gave way to spring, and with the changing season came changes in their lives as well. Willow continued her medical practice in Ogden, but spent increasingly more time at the Harrington cabin. The townsfolk noticed, of course in small communities, little goes unobserved, but most were supportive. Garrett Harrington was well respected, and Dr. Wells had proven her worth many times over during the harsh winter months. Sophie bloomed like the wildflowers that carpeted the Wyoming hills in April. She grew inches seemingly overnight. Her reading improved dramatically under Willow's tutelage, and she developed a fascination with medicine that both adults encouraged. One warm afternoon in early May, Willow rode to the cabin after a long day treating patients. She found the main room empty, a note on the table directing her to the creek. Following the familiar path, she heard laughter before she saw them. Sophie sat cross-legged in the tall grass near the creek bank, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders. Her small fingers worked deftly, weaving something from the long grasses. Garrett was nearby, attempting to fish but clearly more interested in watching his daughter's creation. Neither had noticed Willow yet, and she paused, taking in the peaceful scene. Sophie's tongue protruded slightly in concentration as she braided the grass into an intricate pattern. The sight brought a sudden lump to Willow's throat. This child, who had lost her mother so young, finding joy in simple creativity. Sophie looked up then, her face lighting with pleasure. "Willow." "Look what I'm making," Willow approached, smiling. "It's beautiful, Sophie. What is it?" "A grass doll," the girl explained, holding up her handiwork. "I'm trying to remember how to braid it the way Mama showed me, but I can't get it right." Garrett stood, setting aside his fishing pole. "She's been at it for an hour, determined to get it perfect." Willow knelt beside Sophie, studying the braided grass figure. The child had created a basic doll shape, but the braiding was uneven, coming apart in places. "May I?" Willow asked, holding out her hands. Sophie passed over her creation. "Can you fix it?" Willow examined the grass braids, then looked at the girl's downcast face. Something shifted in her heart, not just affection or caring, but a deeper love that felt both fierce and tender. "You know," she said gently, "I think what you need is practice. The way you're braiding is actually quite good." "Really?" Hope brightened Sophie's eyes. "Really?" Willow ran her fingers over the grass doll, then looked directly into the child's eyes. "You'll learn hair again, darling. It just takes patience." Sophie threw her arms around Willow's neck, nearly knocking her backward. "Will you teach me, please?" "Of course I will." Willow held the girl close, meeting Garrett's gaze over her head. The look in his eyes was one of such love and gratitude that it nearly undid her. "Why don't we go back to the cabin?" he suggested, gathering his fishing gear. "It's almost supper time, and I think we have something to celebrate." Sophie released Willow, looking between the adults curiously. "What are we celebrating?" Garrett came to stand beside them, resting one hand on his daughter's shoulder and the other on Willow's. "Life, family, love." The simple words held profound meaning, making Willow's eyes mist with emotion. She covered his hand with hers, a silent acknowledgement of what they'd found together. Back at the cabin, they prepared dinner side by side, moving around each other with the ease of people accustomed to sharing space. Sophie set the table, proudly placing her grass doll in the center as a decoration. As they sat down to eat, Garrett cleared his throat, suddenly looking nervous. "Sophie, Willow and I have something we'd like to discuss with you." The girl looked up expectantly, a piece of bread halfway to her mouth. "What is it? Is it a surprise?" Willow and Garrett exchanged glances. They'd talked about this moment for weeks, planning carefully, wanting to make sure Sophie understood. "In a way," Willow said gently. "You know that your father and I care for each other very much." Sophie nodded vigorously. "You're in love, like in the storybooks," Garrett smiled. "Yes, we are. And we care for you very much too, Sophie." "I know that," the girl said matter-of-factly. "You're my papa and Willow's." She paused, seeming to search for the right word. "That's part of what we wanted to talk about," Willow said, her heart racing. "I've come to love you as if you were my own daughter, Sophie." The child's face softened. "I love you too, Willow." Garrett reached across the table, taking Willow's hand. "Which is why I've asked Willow to marry me, to become part of our family officially." Sophie's eyes widened, her mouth forming a perfect O of surprise. For a terrible moment, neither adult spoke, waiting for her reaction. Then the girl launched herself from her chair, rushing around the table to throw her arms around them both. "Yes, yes, I knew it would happen." Laughing with relief, Garrett lifted his daughter onto his lap. "So you approve?" "Of course I do. Does this mean Willow will live here all the time and be my new mama?" The question sobered them slightly. Garrett looked at his daughter seriously. "Willow would never try to replace your mother, Sophie. Catherine will always be your mama and will always honor her memory." "But," Willow added carefully, "if you'd like, I would be honored to be a mother to you as well, a second mother who loves you very much." Sophie considered this, her young face surprisingly thoughtful. "Mama would like that, I think. She always said love makes more love." "She was very wise," Willow said softly. "So when will you get married?" Sophie asked, practical as always. "We thought perhaps late June," Garrett replied. "A small ceremony here with our friends. And I can be the flower girl." Hope shone in Sophie's eyes. "We wouldn't have it any other way," Willow assured her. Later, after Sophie had been tucked in, Willow and Garrett sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge. His arm was around her shoulders, her head resting against him, their bodies fitting together as if designed for that purpose. "That went even better than I'd hoped," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "She's an extraordinary child," Willow replied, "so open-hearted, so resilient." "Like her mother," he sighed softly, "and like you." Willow lifted her face to his. "Are you certain about this, Garrett? About us? It's a big change for everyone." "I've never been more certain of anything," he said, his voice steady. "I love you, Willow Wells. You've brought light back into our lives when I thought the darkness would never end." She touched his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. "And you've given me something I never thought I'd have: a family, a home that's more than just a place to sleep and work." "Speaking of work," he said, his expression growing serious, "have you thought more about your practice?" It was the one complication in their plans, how to balance Willow's medical career with their life together. "I have," she said. I've spoken with Dr. Harrison in Laramie. He's been looking for a partner, someone to help expand his practice. It's only 12 miles from here, close enough that I could ride in daily or stay in town when necessary and be home the rest of the time. Hope kindled in his eyes. You've found a solution. A compromise, she corrected gently. I won't give up medicine, Garrett. It's too much a part of who I am. I would never ask that of you, he said firmly. Your healing hands are one of the many things I love about you. He kissed her palm as if to emphasize the point. 12 miles is nothing. We'll make it work. The wedding took place on the last Saturday in June, a perfect Wyoming summer day. The ceremony was held in the meadow near the creek, beneath an arch of wildflowers constructed by friends from town. Sophie, resplendent in a new blue dress, scattered flower petals along a path marked by ribbons. Willow wore a simple gown of ivory silk, her dark hair adorned with the silver hairpin Garrett had given her at Christmas, now complemented by a crown of white roses. Garrett, waiting beneath the floral arch, watched her approach with such naked adoration that guests later remarked they'd never seen a man look at a woman quite that way before. Judge Peterson, who'd traveled from Laramie for the occasion, performed a brief but heartfelt ceremony. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Sophie cheered loudest of all, rushing to embrace them both before they'd even finished their first kiss as a married couple. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing, food and laughter. As twilight descended, lanterns were lit, casting a golden glow over the gathering. Willow danced with her new husband beneath the stars, feeling a happiness so complete it seemed almost unreal. Mrs. Harrington, Garrett murmured in her ear as they swayed to the fiddle music. How does it sound? Perfect, she replied, resting her head on his shoulder. Though professionally I'll remain Dr. Wells, he chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her cheek. Of course, I wouldn't have it any other way. Later, when the guests had departed and Sophie was asleep, they stood together on the porch of what was now their shared home. The night was warm, filled with the sounds of crickets and the distant call of a night bird. Are you happy, my love? Garrett asked, his arms around her from behind, chin resting on top of her head. Completely, she said, leaning back against his solid strength. Are you? More than I ever thought possible. His voice was deep with emotion. You've made us whole again, Willow. She turned in his arms, reaching up to touch his beloved face. No, my darling, we've made each other whole. Their kiss was a promise, a beginning, a declaration of love that had grown from the most unexpected of meetings into something enduring and true. 5 years later, on another perfect June day, Willow sat on a quilt spread beneath the cottonwood trees near the creek, watching her family with a heart full of contentment. Sophie, now 12, sat with her back against a tree trunk, reading intently from a medical textbook. At 14, she had already declared her intention to become a doctor like her second mother, and Willow had no doubt she would achieve her goal. Nearby, 3-year-old twins James and Catherine chased butterflies through the tall grass, their delighted squeals carrying on the warm breeze. Both had inherited their father's gray eyes and their mother's dark hair, a perfect blending of their parents. Garrett approached from the direction of the barn, carrying their youngest, 10-month-old Thomas, on his hip. The baby reached for Willow as they drew near, his chubby hands opening and closing eagerly. Someone decided he's hungry, Garrett explained, handing over their son, and impatient like his mother. I prefer to call it determination, Willow replied with a smile, settling the baby to nurse beneath a light shawl. A useful quality in both medicine and motherhood. Garrett sat beside her on the quilt, calling to the twins to be careful near the water. They obeyed immediately, adoring their father as they did. He had proven to be as wonderful with their shared children as he was with Sophie, patient and kind, firm when necessary, but always loving. I received a letter from Dr. Harrison today, Willow said, stroking Thomas's dark curls as he nursed. He's finally found someone to replace me at the practice. Garrett raised an eyebrow. Are you having second thoughts? She shook her head. Not at all, I'm ready for this change. After the twins were born, Willow had reduced her hours at the Laramie practice, and with Thomas's arrival, she'd begun to consider a different arrangement altogether. The new doctor arrives next month. I'll stay on long enough to help her settle in, then begin my own practice here. They'd been expanding the cabin over the years, adding rooms as their family grew. The newest addition was a small examination room where Willow could see patients closer to home, serving the neighboring ranches and farms. "You're sure it's what you want?" Garrett asked, his concern evident. "I know how much you've loved working with Harrison." "I've loved it," she agreed, "but our family needs me more now, and this way I can continue practicing medicine without the daily ride to town." She smiled, touching his hand. "It's not a sacrifice, Garrett, it's a choice, one I'm making gladly." He lifted her hand to his lips. After 5 years of marriage, the gesture still sent warmth through her. "You continue to amaze me, Willow Harrington." Sophie looked up from her book, watching them with a knowing smile. At 12, she was old enough to recognize and appreciate the deep love between her parents. "Are you two being romantic again?" "Always," Garrett replied with a wink. "Your stepmother is irresistible." The girl rolled her eyes, but her smile widened. She set aside her book and came to sit beside them, automatically reaching to help steady Thomas as Willow adjusted him. "I've been thinking," she said, a hint of nervousness in her voice. "When I go to medical school, I want to use both names, Sophie Harrington Wells." Willow looked up, surprised and deeply moved. "Oh, Sophie. Is that all right?" the girl asked, uncertain. "I want to honor Mama's memory, but you're my mother too, Willow. You've taught me so much, not just about medicine, but about strength and kindness and, well, everything important." Garrett cleared his throat, clearly emotional. "I think it's a wonderful idea, Sophie, and both your mothers would be proud." Sophie beamed, then jumped up as the twins called for her to see something they'd found. She ran to them, her long blonde hair now expertly braided in a style Willow had taught her swinging behind her. "She's remarkable," Willow said softly, watching the girl lift little Catherine to see into a bird's nest. "You've raised her well, Garrett." "We've raised her well," he corrected, slipping an arm around her shoulders. "Just as we're raising all our children together." They sat in companionable silence, watching their family, the home and life they'd built together spreading around them like the vast Wyoming sky, boundless, beautiful, and full of promise. Thomas finished nursing and dozed off against Willow's chest. She adjusted her clothing and cradled the sleeping baby, marveling as she often did at the perfect miniature features, the tiny hands, the absolute trust with which he slept in her arms. "What are you thinking?" Garrett asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "About how life surprises us," she replied. "If someone had told me 6 years ago that I would find this kind of happiness, I wouldn't have believed them. A husband who supports my dreams, children who fill my heart, work that fulfills me, it seems almost too perfect." "Not perfect," he said, his voice warm with affection. "We have our challenges, our difficult days, but perfect isn't what matters. What matters is that we face it all together." She leaned against him, their years together having created a comfortable familiarity that enhanced rather than diminished their love. "Do you ever think about that day when Sophie was sick and I came to the cabin for the first time?" "Often," he admitted. "I remember opening the door, expecting to see old Dr. Finch, and finding you instead so composed and professional with those extraordinary eyes." "I was terrified," she confessed with a laugh. "Not of you, but of failing Sophie. I'd only been in practice on my own for a few months." "You never showed it," he kissed her temple. "You were magnificent, and when you stayed all night tending to her, I think that's when I first began to fall in love with you, though I didn't recognize it then." "For me, it was the story," she said, smiling at the memory. "Watching you listen as intently as Sophie did. I saw the father in you, the gentle heart beneath the stoic exterior." He chuckled. "Hardly stoic these days, with 4 children and a wife who knows me better than I know myself." "Wouldn't have it any other way," she murmured as Thomas stirred and settled again. Sophie ran back to them, the twins following close behind. "Papa, can we have a picnic supper tonight, by the creek?" Garrett pretended to consider the request seriously. "I don't know." "What does your mother think?" "Please, Mama," Catherine begged, climbing onto Willow's lap beside her baby brother. At 3, she was already calling Willow Mama without hesitation or confusion, having known no other mother in her short life. "A picnic sounds perfect," Willow agreed, kissing the little girl's cheek. "Why don't you all help Papa gather what we need while I put Thomas down for his nap?" As the others headed toward the cabin, chattering excitedly about what to include in their picnic, Willow remained seated for a moment longer, the sleeping baby warm against her chest. She looked out over the land that had become her home, the rippling creek, the distant mountains, the cabin with smoke curling from its chimney. From the most unlikely beginning, a doctor called to tend a sick child had grown this extraordinary life. A life built on love, respect, and shared dreams. A life she wouldn't trade for anything. Rising carefully so as not to wake Thomas, Willow walked toward the cabin, toward her family, toward the future they would continue to build together, one day, one moment, one act of love at a time. The sun dipped toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, as laughter drifted from the cabin like music on the evening air. Willow paused at the doorway, watching Garrett help the twins pack a basket, Sophie folding blankets, all of them working together with easy familiarity. This, she thought, was true wealth, not measured in gold or acres, but in love freely given and joyfully received. In a family created both by birth and by choice. In a home where every heart was valued, every dream encouraged, every hand held when needed. "Willow," Garrett called, looking up and catching her gaze. "Come join us, we're almost ready." She stepped into the warmth of their home, baby Thomas sleeping peacefully in her arms, and closed the door softly behind her. Outside, the Wyoming wilderness stretched vast and beautiful in every direction. But in here, in this cabin built with love and expanded with hope, she had found something even more boundless, the landscape of a shared life, with horizons limited only by what they could dream together. "I'm ready," she said, smiling at her family. "I've never been more ready." And it was true in every way that mattered. Ready for the evening ahead, for the years to come, for whatever life might bring their way. Because she would face it all with Garrett by her side, with their children's hands in hers, with the love that had begun on a cold winter night when she found a cowboy's daughter sick with fever and promised to make her well. Some promises were meant to be kept. Others, like the unspoken promise she'd made to herself all those years ago to remain independent and alone, were meant to be broken. In their place had grown new promises to love, to cherish, to build a family together. As Garrett took Thomas from her arms, their fingers brushing in a touch as familiar as breathing, Willow knew with absolute certainty that these were promises worth keeping for all the days of her life.